It is the morning of May 29th, 1453. The sun rises over a city that has stood for 1100 years. A city that has outlasted Attila the Hun, that has survived plague, civil war, crusaders, and the collapse of an entire civilization. A city so powerful, so legendary, that armies from across the known world have hurled themselves at its walls and been shattered. But tonight is different. Tonight the walls are cracked. The cannons have done what no enemy has managed in 1,000 years. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the rubble and the smoke, 100,000 men are waiting for a single signal. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, knows what is coming. He removes his imperial robes. He strips away the symbols of a dynasty stretching back to Augustus himself. And he picks up his sword, not to surrender, to fight. This is the story of the last night of the Roman Empire. An empire that began with Julius Caesar, that survived the fall of Rome itself, that carried the flame of civilization through the darkest centuries of human history. It ended here, in a single night, in a city of smoke and silence and desperate, doomed courage. This is Collapsed Worlds. If you're new here, this channel exists for stories exactly like this one. Civilizations that built something extraordinary and then lost it. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. There are stories ahead that will genuinely change how you see the world. To understand what was about to be lost, you need to understand what Constantinople actually was. This was not just a city, it was the center of the world. Founded in 330 AD by the Emperor Constantine the Great, on the narrow tip of land where Europe meets Asia, where the Bosphorus meets the Sea of Marmara, Constantinople was designed to be impregnable. A city on 3 sides surrounded by water. On the 4th side, protected by the most formidable defensive walls ever constructed by human hands. The Theodosian walls, built in the 5th century, triple layered, a moat, an outer wall, an inner wall, each more massive than the last. No army had ever breached them. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople was the greatest city in the Western world. Its population once exceeded 500,000 people. Its harbors were the crossroads of global trade. Its libraries held knowledge that had been lost everywhere else on Earth. At its heart stood the Hagia Sophia, for nearly 1,000 years, the largest Christian cathedral in the world. Its dome so vast that Byzantine architects wrote that it seemed to hang from heaven on a golden chain. But by 1453, the glory was a ghost. The plagues had come. The Crusaders, supposedly allies of Christendom, had sacked and looted Constantinople in 1204, stripping its treasures and shattering its confidence. The empire never fully recovered. By the time Mehmed II came to power, the once mighty Byzantine Empire had shrunk to something almost unrecognizable. Its territory was, essentially, the city itself. A handful of walls, a few thousand soldiers, and the memory of what it had once been. The Roman Empire, the same unbroken line that had ruled the world for 15 centuries, was, in truth, already dying. It just needed one final blow. In 1451, a 19-year-old ascended to the throne of the Ottoman Empire. The courts of Europe were not alarmed. Young sultans had come and gone. They were often impulsive, easily distracted, quickly managed. They were wrong about this one. Mehmed II was unlike anyone who had sat on the Ottoman throne before him. He spoke 6 languages. He studied Greek philosophy. He was fascinated by history, particularly Roman history, and from the earliest days of his reign, he was obsessed with one ambition: Constantinople. The city was already surrounded. The Ottomans controlled every territory around it. Constantinople was, in practical terms, an island, a tiny relic of a dead empire, kept alive by the strength of its walls and the fragile mercy of Ottoman sultans who had not yet decided to finish the job. Mehmed decided to finish the job. He commissioned a Hungarian engineer named Urban to build something that had never existed before. A cannon so large it would make the Theodosian walls, the walls that had held for 1,000 years, irrelevant. The result was a monster, nearly 9 meters long, a barrel wide enough for a man to crawl inside. It could fire a stone ball weighing 500 kilograms over 1.5 kilometers. It took 60 oxen and 400 men to move it. When it finally fired its test shot, it was heard from 15 kilometers away. The people of Constantinople heard it too. On the 6th of April, 1453, the Ottoman army arrived. The defenders of Constantinople watched from the walls in silence as the horizon filled with soldiers. Tents, horses, artillery. The modern estimate puts the Ottoman force at between 60 and 80,000 men. Constantinople's entire defending force numbered fewer than 7,000. Emperor Constantine XI had sent desperate appeals across Europe. He had begged Venice, Genoa, the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor. He had promised church union, the most controversial concession a Byzantine emperor could make, in exchange for military support. What he got was a trickle, a few hundred Genoese soldiers, led by a mercenary named Giovanni Giustinian, some Venetian sailors whose ships happened to be in the harbour, a handful of papal promises that arrived too late, 7,000 men against 80,000. And then the cannons opened fire. The bombardment that followed lasted 53 days, day after day. Urban's cannon and dozens of smaller guns hammered the Theodosian walls. Sections would collapse. The defenders would work through the night, filling breaches with rubble, timber, barrels of earth, rebuilding enough to survive another day. And in the morning, the cannons would start again. It was exhaustion as a weapon. The Byzantine defenders could not rest, could not recover. They were running out of men, out of material, out of time, but still the walls held. The land walls were holding, so Mehmed did something that, even to his own commanders, seemed impossible. The Golden Horn, the inlet that formed Constantinople's northern harbour, was protected by a massive chain stretched across the water. No Ottoman ship could enter. Mehmed's naval blockade was incomplete, and on April 20th, a small fleet of Christian supply ships had broken through to the city, causing celebrations on the walls and fury in the Ottoman camp. Mehmed's response was extraordinary. He ordered his fleet dragged overland, 70 ships, hauled on greased wooden rollers up and over a hill, and lowered into the Golden Horn behind the chain, in a single night, in secret. The people of Constantinople woke on the morning of April 22nd to find Ottoman warships already inside their harbour. The morale effect was devastating. If the enemy could do the impossible, if physics itself would not protect them, what hope remained? In the city, people flocked to the churches. The clergy argued bitterly over whether to accept union with Rome in exchange for Western military support, a compromise that half the population considered worse than conquest. One Byzantine nobleman reportedly said he would rather see the Ottoman turban in the city than the Catholic mitre. It was the kind of thing people say when they have run out of options. If this story is hitting you the way it hits me, subscribe before the next chapter, because what happens in the final night of Constantinople is one of the most extraordinary things in human history, and it's about to get darker. On the night of May 22nd, a partial lunar eclipse turned the moon blood red over the city. To the people of Constantinople, this was not astronomy. It was prophecy. For generations, a legend had circulated that Constantinople would never fall while the moon was full. Now, the moon was dying above them. 4 days later, a thick fog rolled in from the sea, unusual for May in that part of the world. And then, as the fog lifted, witnesses reported a strange light playing around the dome of the Hagia Sophia. Some said it was the Holy Spirit departing. On the evening of May 28th, Constantine XI led a final procession through the city. Citizens, soldiers, priests, those who remained, walked the streets together in candlelight, carrying icons and relics. It was a farewell. Everyone understood it. That night, the last Christian Mass ever celebrated in the Hagia Sophia was held. Soldiers came in their armor. Women brought their children. The great church was filled beyond capacity, people standing in every corner, pressed against ancient mosaics of Christ and the Virgin. It was, eyewitnesses later wrote, the most moving service anyone had ever witnessed, and it was the last. After the service, Constantine XI returned to his palace. He asked forgiveness from everyone present for anything he had ever done wrong. He removed his imperial insignia, the robes, the symbols of 15 centuries of Roman succession. Then he rode to the walls. Just after midnight on May 29th, Mehmed II gave the order. The final assault began in 3 waves. First came the irregulars, lightly armed troops used to exhaust the defenders and absorb casualties. The Byzantines held them off, but they were tiring. Then came the Anatolian regulars, better armed, better trained. They pushed harder. Breaches in the walls were attacked simultaneously. The defenders ran from point to point, plugging gaps, barely keeping pace. And then came the blow that broke everything. Giovanni Giustiniani, the brilliant Genoese mercenary who had held the land walls together through sheer military skill, was struck by a crossbow bolt. The wound was serious. His men urged him to leave the walls and seek medical treatment. He went. The moment the defenders saw their commander carried away, something broke. Panic spread down the walls like wildfire. Men abandoned their posts to see what had happened, and in the chaos, someone discovered that a small gate in the walls, the Kirke Porta, had been left unlocked. No one knows how, no one knows why. But the Ottomans found it. Within minutes, Ottoman soldiers were inside the walls. The cry went up from 1,000 voices. The city is fallen. And it was. Constantine XI heard the cry. He knew what it meant. He removed the last of his imperial insignia, keeping only the simple red leather boots that marked him as emperor. He drew his sword, and he charged. He was never seen again. His body was never conclusively identified. The 88th emperor of Rome, the last in an unbroken line stretching back over 15 centuries, died somewhere in the rubble and the smoke, fighting to the end. The fall of Constantinople didn't just end an empire, it launched the age of exploration. It accelerated the Renaissance. It redrew the map of the world. And it started with one cannon that had never existed before, and one gate that someone forgot to lock. If that's the kind of history you want more of, subscribe to Collapse Worlds. The next video drops soon, and the civilization we're covering next disappeared so completely, its own people never saw it coming.